We talk a lot about how a good lawyer can make or break your case, and that they can sometimes be the difference between getting sent to prison or walking away scot-free. But what do you do when a lawyer thinks above the law himself? For Stephen McDaniel, he would no longer be the one questioning the suspect. So Lauren Giddings was a 27-year-old student at Mercer University Law School. She lived in an apartment right across the college, and her time at Mercer was quickly coming to a close, which meant she was gearing up to take the big bad bar exam. Lauren graduated in May of 2011 and had just gotten back from celebrating her sister's wedding in June. That same June, she would be one test away from completing her dream and passing the state bar exam. She had been seen countless nights studying away in the law library, just gearing up for the big day. But no one knew that after a night out with her friends on June 25th, Lauren would never be seen alive again. When Lauren hadn't been spotted in the law library the past few days, her campus friends found it very out of character and began to grow suspicious. That was not like Lauren, who put her heart and soul into anything she pursued. But suddenly, when a weekend had passed and no one had heard from Lauren, her friends called the Giddings family to ask if she was okay. Her family is like, oh yeah, we haven't heard from her in a couple days, but Lauren warned us that she would be studying for the bar 24/7, so she'd be hard to reach. But her friends insisted that she's nowhere to be found and decided to search on their own. So one friend contacted the police and got them to come out to Lauren's apartment. But when the officers didn't see any sign of a break-in, they just bounced. By this point, Lauren had been missing for 4 days, and Lauren's sister, Caitlin, called a friend on campus and told her where Lauren hid a key so she could get inside the apartment. The friend went inside and saw all of Lauren's things still in the house. Her purse, her keys, her wallet, her student ID. Lauren's car also had been left parked in the driveway, but still no sign of Lauren. So now the alarm bells were ring-a-ding-dinging, and Caitlin called the police. Caitlin told police that Lauren never said she was in fear for her safety, but she did remember one particular detail that Lauren mentioned that stuck out to her. Around a year earlier, Lauren said that after getting home from a trip, she thought that some things in her apartment had been moved around. The police, for once, didn't suspect Lauren had run away after seeing her items left in the house, so they launched an investigation. Police scoured the apartment complex and interviewed any nearby neighbors who could have possibly seen something, but so far, no dice. It wasn't long before one of the officers searching the area discovered a foul smell coming from a trash bag in the dumpster. Following his nose, the officer opened the bag and found the source of the horrifying smell. And not to get too graphic, but the police knew that they had most likely found Lauren, but they had to confirm it with DNA testing because pieces were missing. Despite the horrendous find, this was the lucky break that the investigators needed. The dumpster should have already been collected that morning, but the garbage truck was running late that day, which left Lauren's remains and the DNA on those remains to be found and collected by some poor soul. Had the trash truck been on time that day, it's possible that Lauren's remains would have never been located. And as soon as they were, the police were about to meet their first suspect. So the police began to question Lauren's friends in order to get a better picture of who Lauren actually was, and more importantly, who could have done this to her. During their questioning, a fellow law student, 25-year-old Stephen McDaniel, who also lived across the hall from Lauren, told them that he knew Lauren really well. He also went to Mercer and had apparently asked Lauren on a date, but she declined because she was dating someone else at the time. He told them that Lauren was as nice as a person as could be and that he couldn't understand why anyone would want to do this to her. And then Stephen does that thing, you know, the classic move that predators before him have done, where he continuously inserts himself into the investigation and tries to help. The investigators immediately took note of this and say he stood out because he was almost too helpful with the police. And then Stephen gave a bizarre performance in an interview on live television when he was informed that a body had just been found. As soon as investigators saw the clip, they were certain that they just watched their perp crumble before their very eyes. And the best part is, this video is on YouTube, so you can view it for your own viewing pleasure. In this video, Stephen was mid-conversation with a reporter talking about how baffled he was that his good friend was missing when she asked him if he'd heard that a body had been found. His eyes went wide and he got very pale and he managed to squeak out, "Body?" His eyes began to rapidly blink and he looked as if he's about to pass out. The reporter asked him if he needed to sit down and he said yes, so he shakily sat on the curb as the reporter tried to cover for him. The police watched this and were like, "This is our guy. Now they just had to prove it, so the detectives zeroed in on Steven and began to look into him. Steven's friends described him to investigators as intelligent but quirky. They said he could sometimes be a little bit creepy. And they said he was a survivalist guy who often stockpiled food and sports drinks. Oh, and he apparently had this weird obsession with zombies and committing crime. And the evidence just keeps rolling in. When the police searched Steven's place, they found the following in his possession: a master key, a key to Lauren's apartment, a flash drive that belonged to Lauren with hundreds of other personal photos on it. On his computer, his search history showed that her Facebook and LinkedIn pages had been searched for over and over and over again, and that Steven stared at her photos for hours. Are you like completely creeped out yet? Because then they found her underwear in his apartment. Steven had free access to Lauren's apartment for God knows how long and God knows what, and he had even been stalking her every move. As if he needed any more proof, the police also found this weird contraption of a video camera that had been duct taped to a wooden pole in Steven's apartment. And on the camera, they see that a video had been deleted, but they were actually able to retrieve it. When the police watched the video, they realized he had used the pole to lift the camera up and look inside Lauren's window. The timestamp on the video was dated to the last night Lauren was ever seen alive. And on the day that they found the trash bag, Steven was arrested for unrelated burglary charges, so the cops grabbed him and interrogated him for hours. Steven doesn't move during the entire 2 hours that he's questioned and barely speaks above a whisper. A user on Reddit actually made a time lapse of the entire interrogation, and you can see that while the interviewer moved all over the place, getting in Steven's face, spreading out, and trying different interrogation tactics to get him to break, Steven remained perfectly still aside from moving his head a few times in a robotic, awkward motion. He also refused any information, only responding in a creepy voice that alternated between two answers: no and I don't know. Hannibal Lecter has nothing on this guy. Hannibal Lecter never blinked. This guy never moved. The cops went on for hours trying to get him to break, and he never did. And you can hear how frustrated the cops got with him in the videos on YouTube. They were like, "You were so chatty this morning when you were giving your little interviews on the news about what great friends you were. Why are you shutting down now?" The interesting part about this is that Steven had graduated from law school a month earlier, so he knew his rights while he was being questioned, and he knew he was free to leave, but he chose to stay. Was he playing the role, or was he showing his true colors? Or maybe he knew that there was too much evidence against him, and there was just no way he was walking out of the room a free man. Within a matter of weeks, Steven was charged with slaying his classmate. Years passed while evidence mounted against Steven, and he maintained his innocence up until a week before the jury selection in his trial, when he pleaded guilty to taking the life of Lauren Giddings. He accepted a plea deal in order to avoid being sentenced to capital punishment. He confessed in court that he let himself into Lauren's apartment at 4:30 in the morning while wearing a mask, and that she woke up when the floor creaked. He said that Lauren very calmly told him to get out, but he leaped across the bed and tackled her. He was able to grab her and hold her by her throat as they tumbled out of the bed. Lauren actually got the mask off of Steven during the struggle and recognized him. She begged him by the name to stop, but Steven just continued until she was gone. After that, he moved her to the bathroom and went back to his apartment, where he spent the rest of the day. That night, he returned to hide the evidence and wrapped the pieces in plastic and disposed of them in different trash cans by the law school and his complex dumpster. Then he cleaned up everything and continued to act like she was still alive until 2 days later, when she was discovered. But don't forget, he had to have his moment in the spotlight where he acted as the concerned friend who had no idea where she'd gone, only for that plan to completely backfire on him. The prosecutors in court would use his TV debut as further proof of his guilt and argue that his reaction is not of shock that a body had been found, but of pure terror, because he knew he'd been caught. Later, a hacksaw blade was found in Steven's apartment with Lauren's DNA on it. Steven said the rest of Lauren's remains were in another dumpster nearby. But by the time detectives got to it, it had already been hauled away, and the remains were never recovered. Steven McDaniel was sentenced to prison for life, and Lauren Giddings' family found solace in this. Steven said in a statement that he didn't know why he did what he did, but that if he could take back what happened, he would. It's really easy, Steven. Just don't be a piece of shit and execute people. In 2012, Steven's mom, Glenda, gave an interview where she claimed her son was framed, and that he was forced to take a plea deal so he wouldn't face capital punishment? Oh, brother. What if we were wrong? What if Stephen McDaniels really was just this antisocial guy with some strange interests and the real villain is still out there? Even if that was true, that still doesn't mean that you get away with your other creepy of stealing people's personal items and spying on your neighbor. He would have made a terrible lawyer, and at the very least, we can take comfort in knowing that not only was the right man put away for life, but a shitty lawyer was stopped from ever practicing.